Hashtag the psychology of the family scapegoat, why one person always blamed. Hashtag the invisible role picture, family dare. The atmosphere seems calm, the food is warm, conversation flows. But beneath the surface, there's invisible tension. The father sighs too heavily. The mother avoids eye contact. The siblings laugh, but the sound isn't quite natural. Then it happens. Someone spills a drink or makes the wrong joke, a tiny, inconsequential mistake, and suddenly all eyes turn to one person, the one who always gets blamed, the one who becomes the lightning rod for all the family's unspoken frustrations. That person is the scapegoat. If you've ever been in that position, you know it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It shapes the way you see yourself, the way you move through the world, the way you breathe in every relationship that comes after. Being the scapegoat isn't just about blame. It's about being cast into a role you never asked for. Hashtag why families create scapegoats. The scapegoat role doesn't appear by accident. It's a deeply psychological mechanism that families unconsciously create to maintain balance, avoid collapse, direct their hidden chaos somewhere safe, but the safe place becomes a person. Here's the question that unlocks everything. Why do families, which are supposed to be places of love and protection, choose one of their own to carry the collective weight of their dysfunction? By the end of this, you'll see this pattern in a way you can never unsee. Because when you truly understand the psychology of the scapegoat, you begin to understand not just families, but human relationships at large. You begin to see how unspoken dynamics silently control our lives. And if you've ever felt like the scapegoat yourself, you'll understand why it feels so painfully real, but also why. It was never truly about you. Hashtag the family's hidden tension. Every family carries tension. Secrets, regrets, financial struggles, unhealed wounds, unspoken conflicts. These things don't just disappear. They need somewhere to go. So unconsciously, families create a system of roles, the golden child, the peacemaker, the invisible one, the hero, and the scapegoat. One who absorbs everything no one else wants to touch. Hashtag project identification. Psychologists call this projective identification. It's when one person becomes the container for the emotions others cannot face in themselves. If the parents feel shame, the scapegoat becomes the shameful one. If the family feels anger, the scapegoat becomes the angry one. If the family feels inadequate, the scapegoat is painted as the failure. The role becomes a mirror reflecting not who the scapegoat truly is, but everything the family cannot accept about itself. Hashtag the cruel irony here is what's heartbreaking. The scapegoat is often the most sensitive, the most intuitive, the one who sees the family's truth most clearly. And that's precisely why they're chosen, because their very presence threatens to expose what everyone else wants to deny. So instead of listening to them, the family silences them. Instead of embracing them, the family exiles them. The truth teller becomes the problem. Hashtag the weight that never lifts. Imagine growing up under that weight. Every criticism hits you harder. Every glance feels like judgment. Every success you achieve is either minimized or twisted into something else. Over time, you start to internalize the role. You start to believe, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am the one who ruins everything. And that belief doesn't stay in childhood. It follows you into adulthood, is shaping your friendships, your relationships, your career. Whispers in your ear whenever you feel joy, telling you you don't deserve it. Hashtag the hidden power. But here's what I want you to hold on to. What if the scapegoat isn't just the most rejected one in the family? What if they're also, paradoxically, the most powerful? What if buried inside this painful role is a hidden strength that no one else in the family possesses? Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Hashtag family homeostasis. The need for balance. One of the most important concepts here is family homeostasis. Families, like any system, crave stability. Even if that stability is unhealthy, it feels safer than change. So when conflict rises, instead of facing the root cause, Families often redistribute the tension onto one member. The scapegoat becomes the pressure valve. They're blamed not because they're truly guilty, but because the family's fragile balance depends on it. It's like a play where every actor has a script. The golden child gets praise, the peacemaker smooths. Over fights, the scapegoat gets blamed. Everyone plays their part, so the story keeps running. Hashtag the imposed role. Here's the tragedy. The scapegoat is not playing a role they chose. It's a role imposed upon them. And once the narrative is written, it's painfully difficult to rewrite. If you've ever been scapegoated, you know the feeling of invisibility. You can't shout your truth, but nobody listens. You can explain your intentions, but nobody believes. You can try to be perfect, but perfection never protects you because the role isn't about what you do. It's about what the family needs you to be. Hashtag the healthiest member. Here's the part that's easy to miss. The scapegoat is often the healthiest member of the family system. Why? Because they're the one refusing to participate in denial. They're the one carrying the shadow that others refuse to face. They're the one exposing the wound, even if unconsciously. In that way, the scapegoat is both the victim and the healer. Hashtag the pattern that repeats. If you've ever been scapegoated, have you noticed how it repeats itself? How you sometimes find yourself playing the same role in workplaces, friendships, romantic relationships. That's not a coincidence. The role gets internalized. Your nervous system, your self-concept, your sense of worth, it all learns to expect blame, to anticipate rejection. And without realizing it, you might walk into new rooms already bracing for it. Hashtag the cycle breaker. But here's where it gets interesting. When researchers study family systems, they find that the scapegoat is often the one who eventually breaks the cycle. Why? Because pain becomes fuel. The exile becomes the seeker. The rejected one becomes the truth teller. And the very role that once crushed you becomes the reason you learn to heal. Hashtag the hidden gift the scapegoat carries awareness. They see what others cannot. They feel what others deny. And while that awareness makes them the target inside their family, it becomes their gift outside of it. They develop resilience, empathy, intuition. They become the ones who can walk into a room and feel the unspoken, create art, write stories, led with compassion, see through illusions. Of course, this transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires healing, reflection, often years of unlearning. But the potential is there. Hashtag you are not broken. If you've ever been the scapegoat, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not the problem. You are the mirror that was forced to carry everyone else's reflection. And now you get to decide whether to keep carrying it or to set it down. Hashtag why you were chosen. What if the scapegoat's role isn't random at all? What if the very child who becomes the scapegoat is chosen precisely because they carry the qualities the family cannot face? Here's what I've come to believe families, just like individuals, have. Shadows. Hidden aspects of themselves they don't want to see. And often, the scapegoat is the one who embodies or reveals that shadow. Maybe they're more sensitive, and the family cannot tolerate vulnerability, more rebellious, and the family cannot tolerate defiance, more honest, and the family cannot tolerate truth. The scapegoat becomes the screen onto which the family projects what they most fear about themselves. It's not weakness that makes someone the scapegoat. It's often strength that threatens the family's illusion. So unconsciously, the family says, we cannot carry this. You will carry it for us. And the child, without choice, becomes the carrier. Hashtag internalized blame. What does this do to the scapegoat's psychology? When you grow up being told you're the problem, you don't just resist it. You absorb it. You start building an identity around rejection. Every criticism confirms what you already suspect. Every misunderstanding reinforces the belief that maybe you're fundamentally wrong, fundamentally unworthy. Psychologists have found that scapegoated children often develop what's called a false self, protective mask, polite, accommodating, sometimes even overachieving that hides the pain inside. The false self says, if I can just perform well enough, maybe I'll finally be accepted. But deep down, the real self is suffocating, waiting for permission to exist. Hashtag the impossible quest. Here's the heartbreaking part. The scapegoat often spends years, sometimes decades, trying to earn the approval of the very people who placed them in the role. They try to fix themselves, prove themselves, redeem themselves. But the truth is, no amount of proving will ever rewrite the family script out, because the role was never about truth. It was about survival. Hashtag the hidden doorway. While this sounds bleak, there's a hidden doorway inside this pain. And once the scapegoat discovers it, everything begins to change. The very thing that once crushed them becomes the seed of their freedom. Hashtag how it affects adulthood. Research shows that former scapegoats often struggle with boundaries. They may over-explain, over-apologize, stay in toxic relationships longer than they should simply because they're nervous. System expects rejection on the flip side. Some become fiercely independent, determined never to need anyone again. Both are survival strategies shaped by early wounds. Hashtag the shift of awareness, but here's where awareness comes in. Once you realize that your patterns are not proof of your brokenness, but proof of your survival, you can begin to shift them. You can begin to see that what you thought was weakness was actually resilience. You can begin to reclaim the voice that was silenced. Hashtag the scapegoat's power revealed. Most members of the family system remain trapped in the cycle of denial. The golden child continues performing. For approval, the peacemaker continues smoothing over conflict, but scapegoat, the one who was exiled, is often the first to seek healing. Why? Because pain forced them to. Exile pushed them towards self-discovery. Rejection demanded they look inward for strength. And so, paradoxically, the scapegoat becomes the one most likely to break the cycle. They become the cycle breaker, the one who says, this ends with me. They become the one who learns about psychology, therapy, boundary. Spirituality, dares to face the family shadow head on, refuses to pass it forward. Think about that for a moment. The very person who was blamed for everything becomes the one who transforms everything. That is the hidden gift of the scapegoat. Hashtag your pain does not define you. If you've ever been in that role, I want you to hear this clearly. The pain you endure does not define you, but the strength it gave you can. Hashtag the moment of liberation. The scapegoat's healing begins the moment they realize the blame was never about them. It was projection displacement, the family's way of surviving. Once you see that, you can begin to step outside the role. You can begin to ask, who am I outside of this identity? What do I love not because I'm trying to prove something, but because it's truly mine? What relationships feel safe, not because I'm walking on eggshells, but because I'm free to be myself? That's the work. That's the path. Hashtag the messy, beautiful work. It's not easy. It's often messy, filled with grief for the years you lost, anger for the injustice, confusion about who you really are, but inside that mess is also a rebirth, because to be the scapegoat is to be forced into exile. But exile is often where transformation happens. Hashtag the hero's journey. Think of every myth, every story, every hero's journey. The one who is cast out is the one who eventually returns with wisdom. And maybe that's the deeper meaning of the scapegoat, not just to suffer, but to awaken. Not just to carry the family shadow, but to eventually transform it into light. Hashtag you are not the story they told. If you've ever felt like the scapegoat, misunderstood, blamed, rejected, I want you to remember something. You are not defined by the story your family told about you. You are not the problem they projected onto you. You are the one who saw what others could not bear to see. You are the one who felt what others could not bear to feel. And because of that, you carry within you a depth, a resilience, a clarity that no one can take away. Hashtag your destiny is not the role you may have been, the scapegoat. But that role does not have to be your destiny. Your destiny can be to transform that pain into wisdom, Build relationships that are real, not performative. Raise your voice where it was once silenced, live not as the reflection of someone else's shadow, but as the embodiment of your own light. Hashtag the greatest gift, maybe the greatest gift of the scapegoat. Is this, in the deepest part of your being, what it feels like to carry what is not yours? Which means you also know how liberating it feels to finally lay it down. Hashtag the rewrite begins. Now, if this is you, if these words feel like they were written from inside your own chest, then let this be the moment where you begin to rewrite the script, where you stop trying to earn love that was never conditional on your worth. Step out of the role that was handed to you. Step into the life that was always waiting for you. Hashtag the final truth. You are not the problem. You are the possibility, doll. And the world doesn't need you to carry the blame anymore. The world needs you to become who you were always meant to be. Because the scapegoat who learns to see through the projection, who refuses to carry what isn't theirs, who transforms their exile into awakening, that person doesn't just heal themselves. They heal generations. They become living proof that the role you were given is not the life you must live. And that freedom, that's the gift that was hidden inside the pain all along.